cryptocurrencies basically have no value, and they don't produce anything. So you can look at your little ledger item for the next 20 years, and it says you've got X of this cryptocurrency or that. It doesn't reproduce. It doesn't deliver. It can't mail you a check. It can't do anything. And what you hope is that somebody else comes along and pays you more money for it later on. But then that person's got the problem. But in terms of value, zero. Bitcoin has been used, I think, to move around a fair amount of money illegally. The logical move from the introduction of Bitcoin is to go short suitcases, because the money that was taken in suitcases from one country to another, suitcases will probably fall off in demand. I mean, so you can look at that as the economic contribution of Bitcoin to the society.
Well, look, not everybody is right all the time, and I think we have to acknowledge that we all have biases. And look, I'm a disciple of Buffett and Munger, and one of the things that they have said for years, which I believe, is you define a circle of competence and you stay within it. And I think it's been clear in his entire investing career that technology is not in his circle of competence. And so the only technology name that he's owned is Apple. I mean, you could claim that IBM was a technology company. That's borderline. Again, my portfolio is 99% risk on, 1% risk off. And in that 1% risk off bucket, I think that something like Bitcoin is really important. Why? Because it is not correlated to the rest of the market.
That's why I'm a huge fan of Bitcoin. I mean, I'm very, very long Bitcoin. People ask me, on Twitter, I got into a long conversation with a guy over the weekend, and he asked me what my favorite Bitcoin companies were, and I said none. I said, right now you just want to own the underlying commodity. Like, Google didn't choose to be in the USD, US dollar business. Google is a business that's amazing that just happens to get paid in US dollars. Similarly, I'd rather own Bitcoin than try to find the onesie-twosie guy at the edges right now. Now, over the long history of time, there will need to be on-ramps and off-ramps, and companies will be successful. But in the short term, owning that currency and allowing water to find its level, particularly in the developing markets, is huge. And if you don't think that this thing is going to rip, when Brazil goes through a devaluation, when the Indian rupee continues to get crushed, when you have all of this money trying to get in and out of these countries where there's massive, political instability or monetary or financial instability, you're being naive. It doesn't matter what happens in the United States. It doesn't matter what happens in Japan. It doesn't matter what happens in the EU. It doesn't matter. It matters what happens in Argentina, in Venezuela, in Kenya, in Brazil, in India, in Russia, in China. And when you look at where all the activity is, it's in all of those markets.
Yep.
This will be born out of a people's desire to have unfettered access to capital.
I've been in the Bitcoin market since 2012, and I feel like I'm in two different universes. I need a passport to go between the Bitcoin world and my regular world. These are not the same people. And what I would tell you is the people that owned Bitcoin in 2012 all the way up to now, the majority of those people view it as a hedge to the traditional financial infrastructure. Whether that's true or not is unclear, but that's how we've all viewed it. Separately, what Joe says is absolutely right. There's a big difference between correlation and liquidity. And the reality is all of these financial assets in the traditional markets are fundamentally correlated. We saw that in 2007. Everything broke down. Things that we thought were hedges went away. And so I think it's really important to not forget what happened there. So in 2018 or 19, heaven forbid we go through another cataclysmic financial event, we are going to see the same fundamental correlation. And so again, I ask, why would it not make sense to have a non-correlated hedge? For a small amount of this is about buying insurance. It was the same reason why in 2007 and 8, the folks that bought simple insurance.
As a business service, it's genius. And then secondarily, sort of like as an instrument of protecting assets and asset value, I think that will start as a developing world phenomenon, and I think it'll spill over to the developed world. And so you're talking about a 20-year arc, but this thing is going to rip. It's just going to continue to go up and to the right forever.
I mean, can you play the clip in 2012 and 13 when it was at 200 and everybody was laughing at me on CNBC every time I would talk about Bitcoin? Where is it going? It's probably going to 100, then 150, then 200,000. In what period? I don't know. 5 years, 10 years.
but it's going there. And the reason is because every time you see all of this stuff happening, it just reminds you that, wow, our leaders are not as trustworthy and reliable as they used to be. And so just in case, we really do need to have some kind of insurance we can keep under our pillow that gives us some access to an uncorrelated hedge. And it's going to eventually transition to something much more important. But for right now, you're just getting all these data points that prove this thing. It's just the fabric of society is frayed. And until we figure out how to make it better, it's time to just have a little schmuck insurance on the side, and everybody's running in. It's just an incredible thing. I could never have imagined it.
For this younger class of entrant into the market, they probably don't want to buy gold. In fact, they don't want to buy gold, and they want to buy something that's much more digital. And look, I think it's really unfair to not understand something and then to disparage it. Again, I think he's exceptional. I think Warren Buffett is exceptional. I think Bill Gates is exceptional at what they do. And I think it's fair to say that in 30 or 40 years, if I'm, a vibrant, successful investor, and if I'm back on this show, the idea that I know what's happening 30 or 40 years from now, as well as some other new 40-year-old or 30-year-old entrant into the market, is just not true. The reality is things change.
The definitions of social capital in society are changing. And I think the biggest business opportunities are driving change in those really big pillars that today define social capital. And I define those big pillars as healthcare, education, and financial services. Live as long as you can, have the skills to earn money, and then have access to money. Those are the three, in my opinion, new Maslow's hierarchy of needs that people give a shit about. And so finding ways of reconstructing any business in any of those three areas should be the primary focus of very capable people who are trying to both, move the world forward and make a ton of money. Simply put, those are trillion-dollar markets that are completely fucked up, that are ripe to be disrupted. Within that, when I look at Bitcoin, it is one of the most interesting things happening in that financial services pillar that I've ever seen. And the reason I like it so much are two things. One is, it is for the first time, the cheapest and most frictionless payment rails we've ever seen. And so forget Bitcoin as an underlying currency. You don't have to care about whether it replaces fiat dollars or not. What you have to care about is that instead of paying 2.5% or 1.5%, I can basically pay virtually nothing to clear and basically process transactions and get money from one account to another account, right? From one address to another address, which is effectively what today's payment rails do for people. So what that allows you to do is much more profitably have businesses that can basically accept and take payments for anything, for any kind of good and service. And so as a result, more services will exist, and as a result, more interesting creative uses of those payment rails will happen.